The first identification point is that what you address first. You look at the futuristic risks that the AI will possess, which says AI will become super intelligent, right? And then how do you look at policy from there?
So, Professor, what I wanted to ask you is, how do you see law and policy in terms of regulation of AI?
Now, when your question poses is that can AI really be put in the frame of the harm so as to be accountable, right? That's how you would like to look at it. That's extremely kind of a very challenging issue. I think that is something which the current generation of lawyers and students like you would have to start thinking from now.
So, with the growing prominence of AI comes the question of its regulation. The EU passing an act and President Trump's recent $500 billion investment in AI infrastructure. So, what does this mean for the future of multiple fields like law? I'm in conversation with Dr. Mukul Saxena, Director of the Center of Excellence in Public Policy, Sustainability and ESG Research, and Professor at the Alliance School of Law. So, Professor, what I wanted to ask you is, how do you see law and policy in terms of regulation of AI?
I think that's a very relevant question, and particularly at this time when you mentioned the EU AI Act has come into place. And it has enormous challenges that will come up, particularly with AI. And we always qualify the idea of risk and regulation. You balance the risk to the regulation, and you look at how much of regulation is required, right? And so there is a traction of a lot of people talking about whether AI poses a lot of threats, and that's the concept which is coming out. It's already in the market, in practice today in the world. I think that AI will require regulation, but it will also balance with innovation. You more stringent regulations, that lack of innovation will be affected by it. But I think the important thing in kind of from the policy infrastructure point of view, if you see, is how do you define the idea of risk, right? So many of times you say there are assumed risks which may happen in future, right? Or which are likely you are looking at the landscape and it is growing. But they are real risks. So there is for the policy landscape, the first identification point is that what you address first. You look at the futuristic risks that the AI will possess, which says AI will become super intelligent, right? And then how do you look at policy from there? Or more importantly, do you look at the immediate risks, right? And which is known to all of us. Like the risk of how AI is developed, and then you're looking at AI from the perspective of the risk of discrimination, the risk of marginalization, and the risk of even looking at racial issues. So in our countries, maybe caste comes into place. And that's where the landscape will work now.
So you're the Director of the Center of Excellence in Public Policy, Sustainability and ESG Research. So how do you look at this whole AI, the policies regulating AI? All of that?
As I said before, it is a really important space, but it really becomes very relevant to us now. And even if you see their international unanimous understanding on the fifth industrial revolution, the integration between humans and machines, and when you say everything should be socially responsible and has to have a human interface. And that's why I think the policy arena will now actually move to understand the role of AI with a strong amount of human centricity, right? So you may make an AI tool or use AI in model systems, but the human impact will be one thing which will be big. And that's why it gets me back to the question of risk, as I said. So if I'm going to make a model and it says how you look at the policy structure, I may rather be as a center would look at whether it has, the risk, the human risk involved. Does it marginalize a lot of things? does it have a risk of bias, discrimination? That human dimension will actually create more robustness to the idea of the fifth industrial revolution. Because technology as it stands has to have a human interface.
Right. So talking about this human interface, there's a whole lot of debate whether AI can truly become sentient. So how would you define sentience, and can this, as the debate is suggesting, can AI truly be sentient in nature?
I'll take you a little back into history, right? For other understanding of AI and technology, when the computers came and when we started using the computers, it was an input oriented thing, right? You type A, B, C and it gets on the screen as A, B and C. And you started modeling that as the kind of concept of artificial intelligence. You could read, you could do a search engine, right? Now, as you grow and as the technology grows, and if you see the initial period of the AI growing in a space was less. Now suddenly the boom starts, right? Now the question largely comes up. It is not just an input-output delivery system, And when you look at sentience, when you say that AI has a human, it has consciousness in a manner that it understands subjective well-being. Okay, just give you an example, right? When you for example, you have Alexa or such like voice prompt machines. So you begin to, you'll get up in the morning and say, well, I would have some good breakfast, and you decide over something. How the algorithms will develop over there, what you will say is that, well, someday you will just get up and say, well, I'm feeling nice today, and then suddenly, and give me some suggestions. So Alexa will come up and say, or the Alexa-like machines, prompts will come and tell you, why didn't you go to this restaurant? So that is the concept of the sentient part of it, where the AI does have the idea of consciousness and subjective well-being or subjective being itself. So that is one point that comes up, right? And then you begin to see this landscape of privacy issues, intellectual property issues, right? When the AI, people use AI models to draw certain information and become an AI policy, and that's where the challenge again comes up for law. As also is in regulation part of it, right?
So, Professor, I actually come from a literature background, and this whole thing sounds like a fairy tale to me. When I was thinking about this conversation, it's reminding me of the story of Pinocchio. So this man creates a wooden box, and at first it's just a tool for him basically, and eventually it develops human emotions.
The nose goes as he lies, right?
Pinocchio, and to the point where it becomes human itself. So when I think of AI, that's what I'm thinking of, a person, a human creating this, and it becoming closer and closer to human. So what do you have to say about that?
It's a very interesting thing, and I think it can't be better explained in the more wonderful way you put it, right? And I remember Pinocchio's story we used to definitely read. But yes, I think on a kind of a serious note, on how you are looking at regulations coming up, there is a point that this could move an inch forward to the idea of superintelligence, and particularly when you are looking at, will they automatically start gaining their own intelligence? Like you did mention that Indian Express ad, that the system of the AI black box had no idea of Bengali, and then suddenly starts learning Bengali and starts speaking in Bengali. And that's a concept that's also largely refers to one more step of subjective well-being from singularity, from sentience to singularity. Okay, and if I tell you the other way, if you see classic movies, in the time when you look at the Matrix and the old Terminator series, when the robot, when the machine take controls of it, that is where the next step you're edging on. But then that is what people say, and the policymakers look. Well, is that the threat that is anticipated, which is more important to address, or the real risk that the AI possesses now? I think this debate will always be there. But yes, what you're saying is right. If we move from the idea of the sentient to the singularity, where AI develops itself, that will pose another set of legal challenges of accountability, right? And how will you hold accountable? One initially we remember, if you will, I'm sure you'll remember, is how driverless cars were. We always debated on whether the software developer will be held accountable, the company or the driver who feeds in the data. And what you said was very interesting about how they become super intelligent. Would that thus mean that that vehicle automatically operates on its own self and creates, system becomes more intelligent, right? So that is what is going to be the next challenge today.
Right.
And the skeptics, as I would say, or even I can say the realist would say, that could there be a time when the AI starts dictating, even issues as national security issues of importance, or even issues of law and order, riots, and many issues. And how will you handle those situations?
And beyond super intelligence, what if it starts becoming a threat or a harm? Like there's something referring to our Pinocchio story. There's something called the Pinocchio effect in AI. So will it come to the point, and can they be held accountable?
That is very interesting. Again, you're asking a very interesting question, and equally a very challenging question, right? And a large concept of law largely looks at the question of morality one way, the legal practice of the law in place. You look at the question of morality, that's right. So many a times the law will be silent and look at the concept of morality. And then you look at whether it is capable or the act constituted the harm to the society. And therefore you develop from the harm principle. That's about law. And that's why you look at the question of liability and culpability. Now when your question poses is that, can AI really be put in the frame of the harm so as to be accountable, right? That's how you would like to look at it. That's extremely kind of a very challenging issue. I think that is something which the current generation of lawyers and students like you would have to start thinking from now as how to approach the question. So I always teach this thing in my class when I tell it's about this internet thing that came out that the Chinese man married a robot. Right? So I often tell my students, when I'm talking and tell them, how would you now? Then you say that, okay, we'll now take a hypothetical situation, just taking a lead from there. And you say, okay, the supposed wife who was supposed to be the robot or the machine, she behaves like a wife, performs like a wife, and the husband's behavior, she responds like a wife. Right? So it's a human function completely put in place. Now the question comes that if the husband over a consistent period of time starts harming the machine, her own algorithms will develop in a manner to respond to defend.
Right.
And if that case is the case, and any harm is done on the human per se, then would machine be accountable, right? That's what we say. But that's a huge dilemmatic process of where you enter that realm. Okay? So we always say that even if you look at motive, okay, will that be defined? Will you enter this thing called morality?
Right.
Very difficult to answer. Well, can you attribute morality to that? Can you respond this question of morality as a question of behavior? A man is not supposed to hit his wife. Similarly, a woman is not supposed to hit his wife. Let alone harm. And then you say, okay, that's why I told you in the question, well, she performs like a wife.
Right.
So you say it's a performative behavior. Okay. Or wife-like behavior, right? So there's an equivalence you're trying to do. And then by that challenge, will you be able to accountable? I mean, we are still trying to grapple with this question. But if you kind of look at the same perspective in other men, that's the risk, I always feel. That are we leaning to mirror the machine in our image and then trying to look for the norms of accountability, right?
Exactly.
I get your point.
Right.
So what we are trying to do here, or in situation, is that we are trying to mirror. The mirroring is, okay, you look at harm, you look at morality, you look at law, and you say, well, if that is the case, this is morally incorrect, as a human should not, and therefore the machine should not have done.
Right.
What is the risk we are running? We are creating a mirroring effect. You're making a mirroring to the machine, and then trying to attribute value to the conduct,
Right.
which is a very risky thing.
Right.
But to say where the answer lies, I think it is still, we have to keep grappling with this question.
Right. So can you ever take them to court? Can you take AI to the court?
At the moment, yes, you're right, because so much of rights are now being accorded in the understanding of how the AI would function, and we are understanding their entities as independent. And you're right, the question would come up because if you say, if they are culpable because they are superhuman intelligence, and now they are taking control of their lives where human intervention is not required, then can they be taken to court?
Yeah.
It's kind of a very challenging question to answer. As I told you, how would you measure it, right? Would you would you look at it as a behavioral function, as I discussed with you? Would you look at it like a performative function?
Because again, right and wrong is also
You know how?
subjective.
It's so subjective.
Right.
But it's a difficult thing. But if you say it is going to be the next thing coming up, I don't know, maybe I go from a different line of thought. But this question is eminent.
Right.
And scholars and across the people as policymakers are beginning to act, beginning to think on these questions. And very right. Who knows, someday that will be the case. But the question will be, how will you measure?
Right.
Will we risk into going into a mirroring effect? You know, we mirror our own values to it and then mirror.
Right.
Or we will, in my view, would go for some protocols which will attribute responsibility.
Right. So will there
But
be
mirroring would not be a right answer.
Right. So there'll probably be a separate thing for humans, separate thing for AI. Is that what you're getting at?
But if you ask me to look at the future and predict, I think that would be one of the way to look at it. but I am not the real, I'm not the person who really believes in the idea of mirroring it. The whole functions are different,
Right.
So, because the first question would be, how do you attribute morality if you're going to mirror the machine to the robot?
Right.
So that's a little tough question, tough set to path.
Right. So how do you envision the future of legal professionals, especially with AI also?
See, I really agree with you, because in the immediate idea, I think a large amount of domain will go into legal domain and litigation will go into intellectual property.
Okay.
One. If you look at the context of the fifth industrial revolution, and which obviously had, then the impact of AI on machines on human well-being. And human well-being will go from kind of substantive claims to even procedural claims. And the third major claim would be, as I told you before, how does it further divide the society, or the risk to divide the society, right? Maybe in terms, as I said before, in terms of caste, race, gender, color, race, that's color. So, how will it risk to define? Because if the fifth industrial revolution promises, if it promises to have a human interface with machines and more socially responsible behavior, then we will, I think, grapple. So there are three things, I think. Intellectual property will be one major domain in which it will come up. You will look at substantive violation of substantive rights by any machine-induced decision making. And the third is how the risk of cleavage in society by virtue of all those issues came out. So I think there are three major challenges.
Right.
Yeah, and not to mention the risk which we think or anticipate as coming, as you said, superhuman intelligence and accountability, that would be the second phase. But the first immediate thing is here.
So do you think they will develop intelligence to the extent where they can potentially replace judges or be a judge or replace law professionals?
I don't think that would be the case, because, and why I say it, because why I say it is that the subjective attribute will still be controlled by the human, right? And that is why when you see, as for the now, and if you refer to the World Skills Report, they, among the 5 things, and where 6 key attributes of skills, with AI and ML being one, but rest are all skills which are very human-centric, right? Critical thinking, communications still remains human-centric. And this is subjective decision making. You may put the machine into many places, but I think subjective behavior, subjective well-being will still remain the domain of the humans. I think so.
So, and finally, what do you have to say to legal professionals or legal aspirants?
I think 2 things I would say to the legal aspirants, and I would say that one is, we must use technology as far as possible while being very conscious, the risk it poses to you. And I always say that sometimes, why I say this point to you, Ria, also is, sometimes going by machines, much of our argument goes hypothesis driven, okay? You say, well, this happens, so this has happened, establishes a causal relationship. And I feel when you speak about human behavior, when you speak about the law coming in place and how justice should be given, then there's a whole subjectivity of human behavior, the circumstances in which, how do you look at the moral concerns of it, does it pose harm or not, and then you can't be by kind of hypothesis driven like that. So that's what I will tell the legal professions.
So, sir, recently the finance minister has announced that we would be coming up with our own IT Act and AI regulation thing. So what do you have to say about that?
Yes, I think that's a very right move in the direction in which we are growing, And I think it is extremely important from 2-3 points of view. And one is the country looking at Viksit Bharat 2047, and technology will be one of the game changers in which we will look at human well-being and look at Viksit Bharat vision. If we're trying to interface everything in technology, and that will be very good. I think secondly, I also feel that it will moderate the large risks that it poses on us, and how it can be used, to get wrong inputs. I think third point also would come up would be that the abuse of AI, the deep fakes, misinformations, that would get covered. You get a very legislative kind of thing. I know, I mean, to say you look at EU or not, but it is a very progressive legislation we should look at. But do we have the Brussels effect, which means that we look at purely at that and template it? I would say no. But yes, the categorization of risk, they say, as unacceptable risks, low risks, and the other risks, they have got 4 categories. I think something which we can incorporate. But now I get back to the same point which you told me the first time, is regulation and the AI Act. And now, apart from saying that regulations to innovations has largely an inverse relationship with it. The more tightened the regulation you make, the less innovations that come into place. But also, I think, I'm sure the policymakers will be conscious that when you have a regulation on AI coming out, it not only vests its powers to the state, but also how the state monopolizes the power, right? So a country A is purely democratic like ours. So we know how to look at freedom of expression, and we know how this abusive practice can be. But look at another country B, which is authoritarian by its nature, and they have a legislation in place. What does that legislation thus help them? It gives them the space to intervene selectively also, right?
Right.
I may overlook 100 other violations, but I know I want to target you and I have a legislation I'll target. So while it's a great move from our country and make our own AI law, and these are the things that I feel, how they escape. And I'm sure however the AI, the IT Act comes, then we begin to look at these issues.
All right. Yeah. So do you ever think that, so we say we're regulating AI, will we have to regulate humans as well?
We already regulated so many laws, right? So we are regulated well. So.
All right. So will this pose a threat to human dignity? Like if we are comparing humans and bringing them to the same level as AI?
I think yes. Okay. I'll tell you why. There is a whole emotional index, right? Okay. When Gary Kasparov actually, I think, I'm forgetting the name of the computer to whom, Deep Blue or something, right?
No.
To whom Gary Kasparov lost.
Right.
So people began to say, what did the AI feel? It just reinforced algorithmically well. Well, fine, I could.
The question is, did it feel anything?
Yeah, did it feel anything?
Did it feel anything? Yeah.
But at the same time, the human to whom it is fighting, he will have a set of emotions that is there, right?
Yeah.
And that is why I think it may not be the right approach. And that's why I said we shouldn't have the mirroring effect.
Right.
With AI. So that's how I look at it.
Correct. That was a wonderful discussion, Dr. Mukul. Thank you so much
thanks
for
so much.
being here. A lot of insights, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much for inviting me here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.